Want to write an RFP and don't know where to start? Stop copying other people's RFPs and not get what you want. Instead, I have 7 questions I ask my end users that'll help you draft a better RFP. Hello and welcome. My name is Katherine and I'll be your procurement guide. I've worked in procurement and supply chain for 30 plus years, the last 25 in the Canadian public sector. So I have written hundreds of RFPs. And very early on, each process taught me something new that I built upon. So over time, I ended up figuring out that the end users liked copying other RFPs, or worse yet, copying vendor specifications, but we won't get into that today. But they wouldn't get what they were after and they couldn't understand why. But part of the problem is copying someone else's RFPs is someone else's requirements. So even at one time, people started copying my RFPs. And then I had one situation where they called me going, "What did you do with this question in the evaluation?" The problem was is that they copied something that was a requirement for my client, but it wasn't a requirement for them. So they didn't need it. So again, I'm going to re-emphasize this so many times. Don't copy other people's RFPs. You can take information from them, take a look at them, but look for ideas, not copying. And just keep in the back of your mind when you look at other RFPs, not everything that's published is quality work. Not everything published is written by a procurement person. So everything out there may give you some ideas of what might work for you or just give you thinking points of where to start. Getting into how I do things. At the start of a request, before we start drafting the RFP, I want to explain the process to my end users, and so that they understand why I want them to stop copying things. And the other quirk that I find is people want a copy of a template and fill in the blanks. An RFP is not a fill in the blanks type process. Again, you have unique requirements and outcomes. Yes, other people have bought the same thing, but they have different requirements. So again, after I get into the explanation and I get sort of a high level understanding of what the end users are after, I go into these 7 questions. I want them to take a blank page and jot things down. So it's like a homework for them. And then I will have each of the end users, because usually there's a team working on it and various stakeholders, I will have each of them jot down the answers to these questions, and then we'll meet to discuss and compile it. And believe me, it will be a faster way to getting your RFP developed. Okay. So here are the 7 questions. Number 1, make a statement on where we are now, how we got here, what is the decision driving procuring this good or service. Ultimately, I need to understand, why are we buying this? They probably did a make or buy decision, but if I ask them this piece and have them jot it down, it'll also inform the background and the background on the project to help vendors understand how we're here at this place. Generally, RFPs need a background to help bring the vendors up to our understanding of our needs. Second question, make a statement on where you want to be. What are the details, statement of work, services required of the contractor? In this case, it's the future state that we want to be in. And it's the scope of work services that will go into the contract. Number 3, what do you, as experts in your area, subject matter experts, think we require of someone to prove they can get us from 1 to 2? So these would be things of how many years experience do you think they'll need to have? Or how many times do you think they need to have done this before? And then that piece, and number three, is going to become your requirements. But a lot of these things are going to overlap. So this is why it's not a fill in the blanks type of thing. It's getting the ideas on paper, and then I'll see how things relate, and it'll move into other areas. But let's get into the next question. Number four, what do you need to see in a proposal for someone to prove they can do this for you? This would be the response guidelines. Like if you want to see somebody who's done XYZ, then a response would be provide an example of having done XYZ within the last X number of years. This again will tie to the previous part, but sometimes the ideas will fluctuate between. Number five, are there any limitations, constraints, regulatory issues we need to disclose so that the proponents are aware before proposing something we can't accept? So we can't disqualify somebody for if we did not disclose the information. So an example from past was at one point, provincial governments were not allowing for cloud storage. Things have changed over the years, but in past they wouldn't allow for it. Well, if they didn't put it in their RFP and someone proposed it, they couldn't disqualify the vendor, but they also couldn't accept it. So they ended up having to cancel the process and start over. So it's something you do have to keep in mind is if there is anything that you absolutely positively cannot accept, you need to put that in your RFP as a limitation or constraint so that the proposals coming in don't offer something that you can't do anyways. Number six, I can't do the fingers. There we go, six. What problem are we trying to solve? Now, this may sound like where we are, like number one and two, but number six is more about, are there lessons learned, issues from the past that you want to prevent and avoid in an upcoming contract? So, for instance, we may know our current state and the future state we want to be in and the service we want to buy, but there could also have been a past provider that we had some issues with. So we want to avoid those issues as well. So we may want to put that in there as part of the requirements or part of it. Might be something that nobody thinks of in the previous questions, is what I'm really getting at here. Number six is about problems that you may have encountered, lessons learned from previous contracts that you want to avoid, and then we'll pull that in. And that also helps asking that question as well. If somebody copied an RFP in past and they ran into some issues, well, let's avoid those issues this time around. And then number seven, is there an incumbent? We need to disclose this. The vendors need to know if there's an incumbent because they need all the information to make an informed decision on whether or not to respond to the RFP. And if we do not disclose an incumbent, that's hidden information and is preventing them from having all the information that they need. In addition to the incumbent, has the incumbent provided any reports and have access to information that we need to let others know about to level the playing field? This will lead into some other discussions on whether or not it's confidential information. Do we need to do a non-disclosure agreement before we can share this information with others? Or is the information irrelevant? Or was there, now this one is tricky. If there was a problem with the incumbent, we aren't going to call them out for it in the RFP, but we may phrase things in such a way that, they're allowed to respond. However, our specifications have changed from past contracts. Like just to not say something about the issue with the incumbent, but to allow the marketplace to know, no, this is a changed requirement. The incumbent does not have an advantage. So Pulling all this information, that's our 7 questions. Sometimes we'll come up with some more as you're discussing it, that it'll raise some questions. But after you pull all this information together and discuss it as a group, because some people may come up with different information than others, you'll pull it all together to create your RFP, and it'll give you the outcomes that you're after. And then it'll make for an easier evaluation later as well, because the team already built the requirements and evaluation criteria and understand what we're after and the outcomes we're after. So that's my 7 questions. I hope it helps you drafting better RFPs. Stop copying RFPs. And next week, I'll get into why you want to build the evaluation booklet at the same time as drafting your RFP. Until then, thanks for watching.